I was wrapping a pressure bandage around a little boy's ankle in a rural clinic in Cambodia when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Just one vibration, not a call, not urgent, but it felt like the entire world paused. It was Martin, my stepfather. I hadn't spoken to him in months, and I liked it that way. Even the name on the screen made my shoulders tense. That man had a gift for showing up exactly when I least wanted him to, somehow turning every conversation into a favor I never agreed to. I stared at the screen for a second, thumb hovering. I should have let it go. I should have let it slide to voicemail and buried it under a to-do list. But I didn't. I picked up. "Hey," I said flatly. "Oh, Emma," he replied, chipper as always. "Too chipper. Glad I caught you. Just wanted to give you a quick update. I sold the cabin." At first I thought I misheard. My fingers froze, still holding the bandage. "You? What?" "The cabin," he repeated, as if that clarified anything. "Sold it. Last week, actually. The offer came in quick, cash buyer. Honestly, couldn't pass it up. It'll help clean up some debts. You know how it is." I didn't respond right away. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I felt my stomach drop, not in a dramatic movie kind of way, but like my internal organs had just started sinking through the floor. "You sold the cabin," I repeated. My voice was quiet, but inside, I could feel something unraveling. "You didn't even tell me." "Well, I'm telling you now," he said, laughing, like we were old friends. "Look, you're never there, Emma. I mean, you're always off in the jungle or the desert or wherever. I figured, what's the point of letting it sit?" I should have yelled. I should have said every word I'd been swallowing since I was 16. But instead, I said nothing. The kid on the cot was staring at me now, confused. The nurse glanced up. I turned away from them both. "You had no right," I finally said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That cabin isn't even yours." "Oh, come on," he said. "Don't be dramatic. I've been handling things back here while you've been off saving the world. It's not like you were using it. And technically, it's family property. Your name might be on the paper, but you know who's been paying the bills." Click. I hung up. I didn't trust myself not to scream if I kept listening. That night, I sat in my bunk in the dark, with a fan rattling overhead, and felt like someone had just stolen my bones. The cabin wasn't just property. It wasn't even about money. It was the last thing my mom and I shared. She died when I was 20. We used to go up there every summer before Martin came into the picture, before everything got complicated. The place was ours. I used to call it the stillness. That's what it gave me, stillness. The kind you don't realize you're starving for until you finally sit still and feel your own heart beating in your chest, like it belongs there. And now it was gone. Because Martin needed to clear some debts. I called Ava. She and I had co-owned the place since Mom passed. We split the costs, signed the papers. Everything was legal, black and white. What she said when I told her. I could hear her fumbling for her laptop keys clacking in the background. "No, no way. He can't do that. Not without my consent, not without yours." "He did," I said. "And he doesn't seem sorry. He actually thinks he did us a favor." "I'm pulling up the co-ownership agreement," she said. "I'll call you back." I stared at the wall and let the heat press against my skin, but it wasn't the air that made me sweat. It was the rising burn in my chest. He really thought I wouldn't do anything, that I was too far away, that I'd roll over like I always did when he decided what was best for me. But this time, something in me cracked. Not in a broken way, in a lights coming in kind of way. He sold the wrong woman's cabin. Ava called me back 2 hours later. It was the middle of the night for me, and I hadn't slept. I was lying in bed in the dark, staring up at the ceiling fan that kept clicking every 3 seconds. I was counting the clicks like they could keep my anger at bay. "I found the file," she said. No greeting, just straight into it, which I appreciated. "Emma, he doesn't have the authority. You and I both have to sign off on any sale. It's in the joint ownership clause, line 12. I highlighted it. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "So it's not legit." "No," she said. "But it looks like he tried." I checked the property record portal. There's a pending change of ownership filed under your name, but it hasn't cleared. It's flagged. Whoever submitted it didn't include the dual signature form. And that was him. Has to be. But there's no sale listed through a formal agency, at least not yet. Which means either he used some backdoor deal, or he tried to push it through fast and under the radar. Classic Martin. Always 2 steps ahead, not because he was brilliant, but because he didn't care about rules. He cared about shortcuts. I sat up. So what do we do? We start documenting, Ava said. Everything. Every message, every call. If there's anything in writing from him, send it to me. I forwarded the text immediately. No hard feelings. You'll see it was for the best. The arrogance practically bled through the screen. The next day, I worked my shifts like a ghost. My mind wasn't there. Not with the fever charts or the kid with the infected arm, or the elderly woman who kept calling me doctor even after I corrected her. I was back in the mountains, sitting on the porch of the cabin, watching the sunrise filter through the pine trees like gold dust. I was hearing my mom's laugh echo off the walls as we painted the hallway that one summer. I was seeing Ava and me sitting on the roof, drinking beer out of mugs, because we forgot the cups. That place wasn't just a building. It was a piece of my soul. And Martin thought he could sell it for a stack of cash and a temporary reprieve from whatever shady corner he'd backed himself into. No, not this time. Over the next few days, Ava and I became a two-woman war room. She scanned and uploaded every document we'd signed since inheriting the place. I contacted the county records office and asked them to place a fraud flag on the file. I didn't explain everything, just enough to make them pause. And then I emailed a lawyer. His name was Jordan Temple, mid-40s, sharp, didn't talk in circles. He read our documents and said, "If what you're telling me is true, your stepfather could be in serious trouble. You have a valid co-ownership agreement. He cannot override that. Even if he says he's a family member handling things," Jordan snorted. "That means absolutely nothing in a legal context. The sale won't hold, but we'll need to act fast before he finds a way to slip it through." Meanwhile, Martin kept trying to reach out. 2 calls, a voicemail. "Hey, Emma, I think you're taking this a bit too personally. It's just a cabin. Don't turn this into something it's not." It was personal, and he knew that. That was what made it cruel. He always had this way of pretending his betrayals were misunderstandings, like he was the reasonable one, and I was just too emotional to see it. I can't count how many times growing up I heard him say, "You're making it worse than it is." I started keeping a folder on my phone called Graves. Evidence. Every text. Every missed call. Every voicemail transcribed. Ava called one night after work. She was breathless. I found the real estate agent. Her name's Carrie, local office. I just got off the phone with her. And she said she didn't know there were 2 owners. Martin told her it was his property, signed everything solo. She was suspicious, said he was in a rush, paid in cash, wanted to keep it quiet. Of course he did. "Can she send us anything?" "She's emailing the documents now," Ava said, "and she already froze the transaction. The buyer hasn't paid in full yet." I dropped my head into my hands. He really thought he could just get away with it. Ava didn't answer right away. Then she said, "He thought you wouldn't fight back." I knew she was right. Martin had always seen me as the peacekeeper, the one who let things go, the girl who nodded politely at his terrible jokes, the woman who moved halfway across the world to avoid the kind of confrontation that lived in our family like mold. But this time, something had shifted. Maybe it was age. Maybe it was the quiet knowledge that if I didn't fight for this, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. Not just because of the property, but because of what it represented, the only thing I ever truly claimed as mine. I booked a flight home. It felt dramatic, a little impulsive, but I didn't care. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to walk into that cabin and know it was still standing still mine. And somewhere deep inside me, I think I needed to look Martin in the face and show him who he was really dealing with. At the airport, I opened his most recent voicemail. I stood at the baggage carousel while his voice played in my earbuds. "Emma, come on. Let's not get lawyers involved. You're always off chasing causes. You're not even using the place. Don't blow this out of proportion. You're better than that." I laughed out loud. One short bitter burst that startled the guy next to me. Better than that. That was Martin code for "don't make me look bad." When I finally made it up to the cabin, I stood outside for a long time before going in. The gravel crunched under my boots. The porch light was out. The flower beds were overgrown. There was a stack of unpaid mail on the porch table. Inside, everything was slightly off. Furniture rearranged. Rugs missing. The framed photo of my mom and me, the one we kept on the mantel, shoved in a drawer. I found it by accident while looking for firewood. My hands shook when I pulled it out. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just theft. This was erasure. I stood in the center of the living room with the photo in my hands and felt like something in me had snapped, not loudly, not all at once, but the way a hairline fracture becomes a split if you press too hard. This was where my mom and I used to play cards on rainy afternoons. The window seat was where I'd read through entire summers. That scuff on the baseboard by the fireplace, that was from Ava's suitcase the first time she visited. This house wasn't some investment, it wasn't negotiable, and Martin had tried to erase all of it. The knock on the door came late. Too late. I'd already poured myself a glass of wine I didn't really want. I had a fire going. I was trying to convince myself not to let this moment become about him. But of course, it always circled back. When I opened the door, Martin was standing there like he belonged, like this was his place. "Didn't expect you back so soon," he said, smiling like I'd shown up early to brunch. "I didn't move. You're trespassing," he chuckled. "Come on, let's not be dramatic. Do you want to do this here, or should I call the police?" He raised his hands, mock surrender. "I'm here to talk." I stepped aside, not because he deserved it, but because I wanted him to see what he'd tried to claim. He walked in like it was still his. Looked around like he was evaluating furniture he'd already priced. "You rearranged everything I said, voice tight." "Yeah, thought it needed some updating. Cleaned out a bunch of old junk." That junk was my mother's, and mine and Ava's. He turned to face me, eyes narrowing. "Emma, you're acting like I burned the place down. You sold it, or tried to. Without my permission, without Ava's. That's not just sleazy, it's criminal." He scoffed. "Nobody's pressing charges. It's just a misunderstanding." I walked over to the coffee table and dropped the paperwork. His forged signature, his rushed filing, Ava's affidavit. "There's nothing misunderstood about this, and I am pressing charges." His mouth tightened. "You wouldn't really go through with that." "Why?" "Because you're my stepfather. Because I used to call you Dad when I was 12. Because you drove me to my high school orientation." He said nothing. "You know what I remember about that day?" I asked. "That Mom had a panic attack in the car, and you left her there while you walked me inside. You've been pretending to be a savior for so long, you actually believe it." His voice dropped harsher now. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. You weren't here. You're never here. I've been the one maintaining this place, paying for things. With what gambling money? The same debts you've been racking up since Mom died. You used the last piece of her memory to cover your own mess, and now you're mad I didn't thank you for it." He stared at me, then really looked. And for the first time I saw something crack through the smugness. "Do you know how hard it's been?" he said, voice quieter now. "Trying to keep everything together after she passed. After you took off." I blinked, took a deep breath. I didn't take off. I grieved the only way I knew how. "You took everything that reminded me of her and made it yours." He didn't speak. He just stood there, and I watched the air leak out of his posture like a deflating balloon. "Emma," he said, and it was almost pleading. "I just wanted a way out." "Then you shouldn't have stolen your escape route." He left that night without slamming the door. No threats, no parting shots. Just silence, like he didn't know what to do with someone who no longer bent. But when he was gone, I locked the door, slid down to the floor, and cried until my ribs hurt. I cried like I hadn't in years, not just over the cabin, but over everything. Over how small I used to make myself just to keep the peace. Over every time I let him rewrite the narrative. I'd spent years convincing myself that being the reasonable one made me stronger. But it never did. It just made me easier to step over. The next morning, I sat at the table with Ava on speakerphone. "He showed up?" she asked, voice sharp. "Yeah." "And?" I told him the sale's invalid. That I'm pressing charges. "Good," she said, then softer. "Are you okay?" I wasn't. Not really, but I would be. I will be. There was a long pause. "I've never seen you like this," she said. "Like what?" "Rooted." That word stuck with me. A few days later, Jordan, my lawyer, called with an update. The county clerk blocked the ownership transfer officially, he said. The buyer was notified and pulled out. They were never made aware of the co-ownership agreement. "What about Martin?" "We've submitted everything. Detectives are reviewing the fraud claim. If he tries to interfere again, it'll only strengthen the case." "Good," I said. But inside, I wasn't just relieved. I was furious. Quietly, powerfully furious. That it had taken all this for someone to finally listen to me. That I had to scream in paperwork just to be believed. I went back to the cabin that night and built a fire. I poured a drink, sat down with my mom's old journal, and read her words like they were being spoken for the first time. You don't have to earn peace. You just have to stop giving it away. I closed the journal, sat back, let that line sink in, and for the first time in my life, I started to believe it. It started with a list. After Martin left and the adrenaline faded, I found myself sitting at the cabin's kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen old school. I wrote, "Take back what's mine" at the top and underlined it. Below that, I made 2 columns: left side things he touched, right side things I keep. It was mostly symbolic, but it helped. Something about writing it down, about seeing how much of this place was still mine, reminded me I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. Ava came up that weekend. She brought wine, her toolbox, and a look in her eyes that said she was ready to help me burn the whole thing down if that's what I needed. "Don't tempt me," I said when she offered. Instead, we got to work. We repainted the porch rails that had gone dull gray. We scrubbed the kitchen till the tile grout came back to life. We fixed the squeaky cabinet door we'd always ignored. It felt like reverse vandalism, like we were reclaiming space through care. "This is the first time I've seen you stay in one place for longer than 3 days, Ava said as she taped off a window frame. "I know," I replied. "It feels weird. Good weird, real weird." She smiled. That same week, I filed the formal complaint through the County Fraud Division. Detective Vaughn, soft-spoken, sharp-eyed, called 2 days later to go over my statement. I walked him through everything: the forged documents, the fake narrative Martin sold to the agent, the evidence Ava and I had pulled together. "We've seen this sort of thing more often than you'd think," Vaughn said. "You mean men taking what isn't theirs and hoping no one notices?" He gave a short laugh. "Exactly." Meanwhile, Martin stayed quiet. No calls, no texts. But I knew silence didn't mean surrender. It just meant he was regrouping. That's why Ava and I made a plan. We had Carrie, the real estate agent, provide us with notarized confirmation that Martin acted alone. She was hesitant at first, scared she might get caught in the middle, but when she saw how thorough our documents were, she agreed. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have checked harder." "You believed him because he sounded confident," I told her. "That's how men like him work." The cabin began to shift back into focus. The dust settled, the air softened. I started waking up early, not from stress, but because I wanted to. I made coffee in the tin camping kettle I'd had since college. I sat on the porch in Ava's old Adirondack chair and read books without checking my phone. Still, some mornings, I caught myself flinching at the sound of gravel crunching, afraid it might be him again, standing smug in the doorway with some new excuse. But he didn't come. And every day that passed where he didn't, I breathed a little easier. One afternoon, I opened the cabin closet to grab a flashlight and saw the old storage bin where I kept Mom's stuff. I hadn't touched it in years. I sat cross-legged on the floor and lifted the lid. Inside, her scarf, still faintly smelling like lilac. A sketchbook filled with bad charcoal drawings. And a letter folded yellowed in her handwriting. "Emma," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I'm not around to say it in person. But I want you to know this cabin was always yours. Not because of money. Not even because I built it. But because you loved it. That's what makes it yours." I cried again. I let myself. But this time, it didn't feel like collapse. It felt like permission. The letter became my anchor. Every time I doubted myself, I reread it. Every time I questioned whether it was worth it. The fight, the paperwork, the legal tedium, I thought of her hands building the bookshelf in the den, and I got back to work. Detective Vaughn called again a week later. "We've reviewed the documents. We're recommending charges. Forgery, attempted fraudulent transfer, and misrepresentation." I stood in the middle of the kitchen dish towel still in my hand. "What happens now?" "We'll notify Mr. Graves formally. He may be summoned to court. Based on what you've filed, this is strong." I thanked him, then just stood there, towel in one hand, the weight of justice finally starting to shift in my direction. That night, Ava and I cooked dinner in the cabin like we used to. Pasta, garlic bread, cheap wine, and mismatched mugs. I told her about the call. "You did it," she said, raising her glass. "No, we did." We ate in silence for a while. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, but the house itself felt still grounded solid. She looked at me and said, "You're different now." I thought about that. "Not different," I said, "just more here." I started saying no more often after that. No to guilt. No to rewriting history to make someone else more comfortable. No to second-guessing my instincts. And I started saying yes, too. Yes to staying. Yes to building something slower, stronger. Yes to letting myself be still. A week later, I took a walk along the ridge behind the cabin, the trail my mom and I used to hike every year before school started. I hadn't walked it in over a decade, but I remembered every step. The dip where the tree roots stuck out. The break in the trees, where the whole valley came into view. I stood there for a long time, watching the shadows stretch across the mountains. I wasn't thinking about Martin. I wasn't thinking about legal documents or voicemails or who was handling things. I was thinking about my breath, about how quiet it felt inside me. Back at the cabin, I replaced the old photo on the mantel. Not just of me and my mom this time, but one Ava had taken the weekend before, me sitting on the porch mug in hand, laughing at something off camera. I looked peaceful in it. More than that, I looked present. And that was the whole point, wasn't it? To come home to yourself and finally stay. Martin finally called again. 2 weeks after the charges were filed just after noon on a Thursday, my phone buzzed while I was rearranging books in the cabin's reading nook. I recognized the number instantly. I stared at it ring until it went to voicemail, then just stared at the screen like it had insulted me. I didn't want to hear him talk, but I played the message anyway. Emma, I don't know what you've told them, but this is going too far. I never meant to hurt you. I was just trying to stay afloat. You could have called me. We could have handled this quietly. You didn't need to involve lawyers. I laughed, out loud. The sound surprised me. Quietly, that's what he wanted, quiet. Because quiet meant control. Quiet meant no consequences. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The case was moving. Vaughn had confirmed it. Martin would be receiving his court summons within days. I'd already done everything I needed to do, legally, emotionally, spiritually. He'd said what he had to say. I had too. But the difference was mine was on record. I thought about sending the voicemail to Ava, but I didn't. I knew what she'd say. Instead, I pulled out my mom's mug-brewed coffee and sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees. The air was turning cooler, that almost fall crispness, the kind of weather that made the leaves lean yellow, like they knew something was about to end, and maybe that was it. Maybe this was what closure looked like. Not a dramatic explosion, not some movie ending where the villain gets tackled in court and confesses in front of a judge, but me, on this porch, with a full cup of coffee and a quiet heart. I got another call the following week, this time from Vaughn. It's official, he said. He's being charged with attempted property fraud and document falsification. Court dates set for next month. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't jump or cheer or cry. I just said, thank you. He paused. You okay, Lawson? Yeah, I said. I think I actually am. After we hung up, I walked into the cabin and turned on some music, not loud, just enough to fill the room with something other than silence. I opened the windows. I let the air move through everything, and then I did something I hadn't done in years. I danced, alone, barefoot, in the middle of the living room. No one watching, no one narrating it. No one to say, you're being silly, or, what's this about? It wasn't about anything. It was just mine. That weekend, Ava came up again. She brought fresh bread, a new lamp, and a box of flower bulbs. Spring prep, she said. Think ahead. We planted them along the porch edge. Kneeling in the dirt, hands muddy, knees sore. I hadn't done anything that slow or patient in a long time. Afterward, we sat on the porch steps watching the sky turn pink. You ever think you'd see him face charges, she asked. Honestly, no. But you hoped. I hoped he'd finally be held accountable. I just didn't think it would be me who did it. She nodded slowly. But it was. Yeah, I said. It was. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. Not typed. Handwritten. Martin! I didn't read it right away. I left it on the counter for 2 days. I didn't want to know what was inside. I didn't want to care. But on the third day, I opened it. It was 3 pages long. Mostly him trying to rewrite the story. I didn't know you felt so strongly. I thought I was helping. I was under pressure. A whole page about his debts. Another about how Mom would have wanted us to work things out as family. But one line stood out. You used to be so forgiving. That one hit me in the stomach. Because it was true. I used to be forgiving. I used to bend backwards so far for people that I forgot how to stand up straight. Not anymore. I folded the letter and slid it into the fire. That night, I walked the property line. The stars were out, the air sharp. The land smelled like pine and dirt and ash. I thought about everything he'd taken, everything I'd let him take. And then I thought about what I'd taken back. Not just the deed, not just the house, but my voice, my time, my stillness. I've stayed longer in the cabin than I ever thought I would. Longer than any trip, any volunteer stint. And it doesn't feel like hiding anymore. It feels like being exactly where I'm supposed to be. I still work remotely mostly. I still travel sometimes. But the difference is, I have a home to come back to. Not a place I rent, not a guest room, mine. The porch light is fixed. The mailbox repainted. Ava and I installed new locks, not because we were scared, but because this is a boundary now. A line no one crosses without being invited. Martin hasn't shown up again. The court case is still pending, but honestly, I've stopped waiting for an outcome. The outcome already happened. He doesn't have control anymore. He can't walk through my door, or rewrite my story, or talk over me until I give up. He doesn't get to take up space in my mind rent-free. The other day, I found the photo Ava took of me, the one where I'm laughing unaware. I printed it, framed it, put it on the mantle next to the one of me and Mom. This one felt just as sacred. It's proof, not of what I survived, but of what I reclaimed. You want to know what revenge really is? It's not screaming in a courtroom. It's not slamming doors. It's not even winning the case, though, that helps. It's sitting in silence with a full heart, and knowing you don't owe a single thing to the people who tried to shrink you. It's peace that you didn't ask permission for. It's a locked door, a planted flower, a fire you made yourself. This place is mine, and so am I. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is simply stay. Stay rooted. Stay whole. Stay in the space they tried to take from you. I didn't need to scream to be heard, I just had to stop shrinking. And once I did, there was no going back. Because the truth is, he didn't lose the cabin. He lost the version of me who would have let it happen.